The ACN podcast is made possible thanks to the generosity of our listeners and sponsors, including the Agile Alliance. As a nonprofit membership organization, the Agile Alliance is an excellent resource to help you along your Agile journey. To learn more about the Agile Alliance and our other sponsors, as well as how you can become a sponsor or supporter of our show, please visit acnpodcast.org for more information. And thank you for your support. Good morning or good evening, everyone. This is Ray Arell. I'm with Agile Alliance. This is the Agile Coaching Network. This is a place where we can sit down and have conversations about your Agile adoption and how it's going. It's intended to be a virtual park bench, meaning that with any of your Agile adoptions that you have going on, as you know, that there is no one direct way of getting something accomplished or done. So what we do in this call is that we get perspectives from different people across the planet. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with the first question. It looks like the top one, is, do you believe that culture is an emergent property of a complex system of humans? And if so, can culture be designed and created with intent? Ooh, that's a deep question. Hendrik, do you want to start that one off?
We can discuss this for 2 hours, I think. So I'm a super happy applied systems thinker. So definitely, I don't believe it. I think we have proved that culture is an emergent property of a complex system of humans. So definitely that's the case. If so, can culture be designed? Well, it's emergent. That means it's unpredictable. And that is actually the thing with trying to design and create it with an intent. So, but of course, you can try to influence it into a direction that is favorable to you. So I absolutely think that you can influence it, and yet that you can, to some extent, design your culture in the sense that you think these are things that are important for the culture in the company that we are together in, and then try to strengthen or run your organization in such a way that this culture emerges. And then there's, of course, the question how the culture is manifested, and that's maybe also a pretty large topic, but my take on it is that it very much manifests itself by the behaviors of the people in the company. So what do I see people doing, and how do I see people behaving, and what behaviors do we tolerate and do we say are helpful and in line with our company's culture, and what behaviors are not? And I think by mechanisms like feedback and so on, we are able to influence behaviors, and by that we can influence the culture.
Interesting. I have a couple things to add to this, which is I think it's not just the behaviors that people have, but I also think that there's some other things that are in the system that cause a culture to either, stay in place or to move. And some of that is the myths and folklore. I used to work for Intel Corporation, and one of the things that I would always use as a sometimes a jab, I guess, would be what would Andy say? What would Andy Grove say if he saw us doing this? And everyone would suddenly, kind of shrink down in their chair and say, yeah, you're right. Andy wouldn't like that. Maybe we shouldn't do it. The other thing is just control structures, governance systems that, as we start to do cultural change within a company, there's typically the person who will come out and say, well, that's not how we do it. And because the rule says this, and even though that we want it to be different, those control structures just hold things in place.
Yeah, that's a very important thing. I mean, behaviors emerge from the structures and processes and so on that you set in. So even if you want a certain behavior, certain structures, as you indicate, could cause the unfavorable behaviors to emerge. And we see this very often with things like certain processes, like financial processes or feedback processes or talent management processes, what kind of culture that can create, because it triggers reward thinking into the wrong direction sometimes.
And Ben is, he actually was a big highlight here. And Ben, if you want to join the conversation, just let me know if you want me to enable your microphone. He's saying that it's always about management and stopping the command and control top-down approach. Best method for assisting Agile. How do we help management. So if leadership kind of creates culture within certain companies, how do we change that management? How do we change the way that philosophy is done differently?
Yeah, I think absolutely. When you, from a system thinking perspective, I think the leaders in a company, especially in a company that are hierarchically organized, they are much more system relevant, or they have a higher influence on the system. And in that sense, absolutely, I believe that in most companies, it really starts with the leaders. If the leaders don't exhibit the behaviors or the culture that they want to see, I mean, this Gandhi thing about be the change you want to see. That is so incredibly true. And I see so many companies where leaders are saying one thing, but totally failing to behave along the lines that what they have been saying. So I think this is the big problem.
Yeah, no, uh, Henrik was speaking right now, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I can pick out your voice. No, I totally agree. From the leadership perspective, there is a desire to see behavior change in leaders first, and then we will change. And that hierarchy does play a heavy role for people because they look at who to model first. But at the same time, if we are looking at a large organization, a very large organization, there has to be at some level beyond which you start separating the flow of work from the flow of supervision. Now, the reason I say that is because almost every organization has some kind of performance management system, and the kind of measures you put into place tend to dictate a lot of behavior. So you have to kind of decide at what level down are you going to start transforming without putting the rest of the organization at risk, because there must be something that the organization is doing, and that's why they're still alive and functioning. So isolating a piece of the organization that you can attempt to try something new. Now, this may not be new for a lot of agile coaches, but for that company, for the people in the company, it is new. So they have a tendency to want to take measured steps, and that is understandable. So one of the steps that I have taken in terms of working with an organization is we've done this very one simple distinction is let's separate the flow of work from flow of supervision, because earlier we had a supervisor responsible for giving work to people and also managing performance evaluations. As soon as we separate that, we take away the shortest path to command and control. Because if I was responsible for person X as a supervisor and also responsible for getting work done, I could always yield my performance evaluation stick in order to get something done. But now, when I don't have the ability to give work to them, then I have no choice but to help them grow, because someone else who cares for work to be done by person X will be coming and talking to me if person X is not helping me with it. And by person X, I mean team X. And
Right.
so
Right.
I don't mean individual assignment of work.
Sure. And Ben, how do you have think about this?
Well, the thing I want to say was that I see it as an ongoing issue. It seems like management, especially if they're used to a command and control top-down hierarchy way of software development, especially that they initially get on board, but after that, it seems to be a continual reminder process of them. One thing that I've found so far is to find not just agile books, but other books that stress a management style that gets away from top-down management. So it's not always about agile, but as a constant reminder, maybe once a year, especially if you have a governance board or something like that, I found that helps just to kind of reinforce what we're trying to get away from, what we're trying to implement with the agile movement. That's the only thing I've found that kind of helps the organizations I've seen, is to keep reminding them gently.
I just thought that is interesting, because if you have to remind them, it's not really in their hearts yet. And then I wonder what makes them fall back all the time. What makes them not adopting this kind of, because agile is a mindset and a view of how the world works. So what draws them back is maybe a good follow-on question then.
Well, I think it comes down to training. If you look at like the military will continue to drill exercises into teams. And if you look at like Scrum and other Agile methodologies, a lot of these methods are reinforced by practice. And I think managers need to practice this more, because what occurs is that when you get into high stress and high stress situations, the expectation is you fall back onto your training versus falling back onto old routines.
That's actually an interesting point. Usually we focus on training of teams at the team level and maybe scrum masters and product owners, but ongoing management. It's an interesting concept.
Actually, you can take that even a step further. If you only do it at work, it's not, at least most of the time, not more than half of the interactions you spend in your life. You have family, you have friends, you have all the other interactions. If they follow a totally different culture, it makes it much harder to behave consistently. So if you really want to change personally, you should have a look at all the aspects of life, and that would apply for managers as well. If they and family are very controlling, then switching to a totally open and feedback oriented at work is probably much harder than if they come from an open family as well.
Yeah,
but I think it's not only their private environment, because I think most people in their private environment are a bit more relaxed. I think for managers, my experience is that you're often surrounded by a larger ecosystem, which is more like, in the sense of shareholder value and so on, driving you into a different way of behaving and thinking. And I think that's the much bigger disturbance.
I think though that when you're saying the rituals of when you come to work, and I used to have I think I've said this story before, but I used to have this team room that was in front of the office door, and I would watch people put on their badges, put on their uniform, pretty much, and you would actually see their face change, and their demeanor would change. So I'm now going to be, a director of engineering. So I need to go put my badge on. And now I'm in that mode, which is interesting to see when that occurs. And that home life, that switching back over to the stuff I can't get away with at home, because my former work environment was, constructive confrontation was one of the mottos. And I can tell you, I could not get away with that at home. And when we did an agile conversion, constructive confrontation actually as a ritual that we would practice is something that we couldn't get away with either. And we had to unlearn some of that.
Yeah, this is Saravana here. So related to management and the teams and their command and control behavior, this is what I found. We are training them, we are continuously reminding them. But if we go back to how are they measured as managers, their like the CIOs and their directors or their senior managers, like whoever they're reporting, they are measuring the management in terms of single point of accountability. They're not really in terms of delivery of the work, rather than how are they enabling people. So even though we are reminding them, they're at the end of the day measured by, hey, did you enable delivery of the work? So they're measured on pure deliverables rather than did they enable people? Did they enable the teams? And that's the biggest impediment in terms of, so directly it goes back to, somebody mentioned performance management, and how are people measured in the organizations, and working with HR, or is HR in terms of the HR language, how people are measured overall, what does the improvement mean? Because most of the times improvement in HR means it's a bad thing, whereas in Agile world, continuous improvement is a good thing, it's the right thing. So right now, it's the HR is not involved. To me, that's attacking at the problem at the root level of how people are measured, and changing the culture is a big part of that.
Hi, this is Swapna. A lot of good points were made about performance management and reward systems. Does anybody have an example that was worked out in their company or the teams that they were coaching?
Yeah, I have one example. So, when we were first doing our Agile adoption, we had a couple of, I think, some bad artifacts that were in the system. And one thing that we used to do on our reviews, we couldn't get rid of reviews because it was one of those, control systems that needed to stay in place, and we couldn't get a waiver for it. But what we did is we changed we'd have three accomplishments used to be on the top of the list of a review. And we changed it to where the first bullet was what you accomplished. As an individual or as a manager, what was the big thing that you brought to the company? The second one was what did you do for the team? What did you do to improve the place and to make things better? And then the last one is who did you mentor to create more of you and to be able to spread and be able to propagate the culture more? And we thought that by adding those components that we would slowly shift behavior that, it's not about those three top accomplishments of just what you did now. It's now what you did for yourself, what you did for the team, and what did you do to, better the entire company.
Yeah, I've seen something similar with the added view that there was a mandatory part of feedback to the manager in the review as to how can the manager help the team more, what change would be preferable next time, and making people think about that constructively in an open discussion is already a very big step to change the culture. Regardless whether you're working waterfall or agile. So I've seen some of this even emerge in personal reviews before agile was even a real topic in that company, but that made a big difference. Managers who tried to avoid that part of the review were much harder pressed to change later on.
Absolutely. And John, you had your hand up. I'm not sure if you wanted to add something. And also, Liz, you had your hand up as well.
Yeah, no, this is John. Thanks. The conversation went exactly where I was going to ask, was just we're starting to explore a relationship with the HR department. And so hearing those examples was great, and the topic I wanted to get out there for the group.
Maybe one small addition is one thing is performance reviews or yearly feedback conversations and that whole topic. The other thing is rewards. And one thing that we, for example, have changed, we completely removed individual rewards and have only team or even company-wide rewards. Because that shifts the focus from my own contribution, I don't care what others do, towards what do we achieve together. That is also impacting the culture, of course, in the company.
One thing that I liked a lot and the company where I was working together with Ray was that there was peer recognition of work well done. So that whoever you were, to whomever you were, you could clearly state, thank you very much for this, because this was the benefit I received. And very often teams did it, even if they picked people as an example. And that was as well a great method to show the managers, especially of the receiving side, that things were appreciated, that helped others.
Paula, do you have something to add?
The conversation has been fascinating for me because I am actually working on an HR pod around how can we change our performance management and talent development systems to support the Agile culture. So great conversation, really enjoying it, and I'm so glad I joined.
Oh, cool. Are you in HR or are you in engineering or where are you at?
I am in HR. So we are a non-technical Agile pod working to support the transformation to Agile culture in a non-technical environment for our retail bank.
Do you know that overall, I think that everybody's job is technical? I hate that distinction, by the way.
Yes, because we have many technical roles, but yes, they're not literally in our tech environment.
Well, good. I'm glad you're getting a lot of value from this. I could tell you, go ahead, Hendrik.
Yeah, well, one thing maybe to add here is I'm so happy that people like you are participating more and more in these kind of discussions, because we need to have a good conversation between people working in the HR domain, in the IT software development domain. And what I've also seen in the last years was there are more and more books about Agile HR, and there's even Agile HR conferences and so on. So I think this is a domain that is growing and growing. And that gives me a lot of hope, actually.
Yeah, the first thing we need to do is get rid of the words like human capital and other
Resources.
things. Yeah,
Yeah.
resources.
How about people?
I am not a resource. I demand not to be a resource.
Yeah.
Some companies call it people operations or something like this.
Operations. Oh my God.
That's medical.
That's
That is awesome. So I am going to pivot to the next question.
Ray, allow me just one.
You're not allowing me to pivot, but go ahead, please.
I just want to make everybody aware that the format we're using here, the park bench, so just an open discussion. Whoever wants to come and join is welcome. It's as well something you can do within the company. Just make it open, allow the people to join. For some companies, I've seen it, people are really, really astonished if you invite them to something where participation is voluntary. So try it. It seems to work as well within a company.
Oh, absolutely. This is where this format originally started, and I can tell you having a safe environment where people can talk about their Agile adoption and not have to worry about, rank and hierarchy and all the other stuff. This type of call actually worked incredibly well for us as well. So I'll add my vote to that as well. So with that, I am going to pivot now. Which should we do in the steps to adopt Agile in an organization when the starting point is a classical organization? Classical, is that like Bach, Beethoven?
It's classic. It's not negative. It's just classic.
It's like Coke Classic type of thing.
Coke Classic.
Yes.
A lot of sugar in there. It's fun, but it's not good for your health.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Sounds like marriage.
Be careful. This is on a podcast now. I don't want to get out and cause some damage.
So
go ahead.
So maybe I can bring us back onto the topic.
Thank you.
I kind of feel like adopting Agile should be secondary to what business purpose or what business outcome you're seeking. This could be a measurable outcome, or it could be more around how do we present ourselves as a attractor to the new batch of people who are coming and joining the workforce. So there are a variety of reasons that should be the driver, and recognizing and acknowledging that driver is more important than acknowledging or saying we want to be an Agile organization.
I do agree. It's not a destination. It should enable your business to do better and to deliver higher customer value. So fully agree with that. Okay. Brian, did you have some to add?
I was just going to give the thumbs up to some form of external communication beyond the coaching call, because there are great topics that I've heard. I've been just listening, but would love to engage in, particularly the HR topic. I think that's a crucial missing link to some of the things we're experiencing here.
The love that's going around right now is just amazing. I love this. So circling back to this particular subject here, as far as classical organizations, I'm assuming that this might be a waterfall hierarchical organization as described in this question. And stepwise, there's a couple of phases that I've taken to take a traditional organization and move it towards more of an agile mindset. And the first one, and I know I've brought this up many times for people who know me, is we just take the agile principles and we just look at them and ask ourselves the simple question: are these principles easy or hard to do within our company? And if it comes back as 50% or 60% of them are hard or impossible, those are the things you need to work on. Those are the things you need to set plans for and to start moving those towards. And I don't care what method you use. Example for business and developers working together daily. I don't care if you use Scrum. I don't care if you use whatever. Just as long as you're satisfying that regard. How about others?
Yeah, maybe just adding, if you talk a lot about Agile in the beginning of such a transformation, especially, you create a lot of skepticism. Talk about what you want to achieve, what you want to do better, about challenges, changes in the environment, in the business, whatever you want, and then take the principles or something else to highlight. Yeah, there are already solutions out there, but don't say we want to be agile, we want to be agile, we want to be agile. If you have people like that standing up in front of a crowd doing that 20 times without being concrete once, your transformation is already in unsafe waters. Let's say it like that.
How about others?
My experience is that when you start, I'm very much a fan of starting with what do you want to achieve? What are the pain points that we see today, and really start from them, because then you're working on something concrete. And then the first question is, could agility help us with solving these problems, and how could that help us? And then it's very much thinking together between the people who want to solve these problems, letting people participate in this discussion to get the way forward. So that's a method I found, or an approach I found extremely helpful, because you're working on something concrete and you try to solve the problem with a new approach, which is an agile approach.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's one other thing that I've seen missed, at least more often than not, as well. Look for something that is already good. I once had the discussion with the hardware team. They said, hardware, we never can do agile, especially not the regular learning. And then I looked at what they were doing, and they were doing what they called lessons learned every 6 weeks whenever they delivered something. So they were already pretty close, but they just didn't get the connection from theory. So sometimes it's really, really good to just point, we don't want to change that. You're already there.
Yeah. Now, Nina just brought up a good point on the question box. She said that how do you deal with resistance from team members who are not ready to embrace the cultural change? Because, we always have people who are the visionaries who want to go jump forward on stuff, and then we also have the laggers that don't want to move.
That starts with understanding why they don't see that this is the solution to the problems. So for me, it's rather a question of some people resist, or most people I have met that resist are afraid of something, and understanding what they're afraid of is the key to addressing them in a better way, and either convincing them or maybe finding out, okay, maybe from your personality point of view, how your attitude to life is, maybe this is not the right thing for you. Actually, I have seen people also changing companies or changing departments when they because they felt this is not my thing, and that's perfectly okay, I think.
Which, for some reason, I think that and I'll go back to the early days, about 10 years ago when we were doing Agile adoptions. We ended up having some people who left and went to different places in the company, but the Agile kept expanding. And there was slowly no more places for them to go because we had become an Agile organization. And so I learned later on in life when we were doing Agile adoptions to just say that, look, what we are doing here is we're going to be an Agile culture within the company. How can I help to explain that and explain it in a way? And I do think that if people have hesitations as a leader in a company, it's probably something I'm not explaining well, and I need to reach out to those individuals. Eventually, yeah, it might come down to, well, this culture doesn't fit me, and I need to move on. But I tend to first stay in the grips of maybe I'm not doing a good job of explaining it, why it's important, and what urgency, why we need to go move that direction.
Yeah, I agree that more often than you might think, it's as well just a question of skill and ability to do it. If you come from a very structured, very process-oriented way of working for 20 years, just doing it differently needs somebody to explain it, to show it to you really how to do it. It's not even about wanting or not wanting to do it, but simply not being able to imagine this because you've never done it. And then sometimes all you need to do is be on the floor with the people who can't do it and tell them that's the way. And if they do something right, reinforce it and get them to do it more, because they're not all that aware of how they do it and how they could do it.
I think it's interesting when you talk about the idea of having somebody change. In the organization that I work for, some teams have an average tenure of 20 years and are experts, or at least experts in their particular lane, if you will. I almost think that if you want to do a larger scale Agile adoption, you find those pockets where Agile works the best, and you show the wins, even if it starts out small, but over time show the wins large, and then try to find the volunteer approach to submitting more teams to it.
So this builds up the peer pressure within the organization a bit, showing great value that's being created. Is that what you're kind of referring to?
Absolutely.
Okay. One other thing, that's the reason why we actually started running internal conferences, because we, to be up on stage and to get some executives also to do some introductions of these teams are doing great stuff. That tended to move the needle a little bit with people, saying that, hey, we're serious about this. We happen to have a culture that we were doing improvement efforts on an annual basis, meaning that this year it's going to be Agile, next year it's diversity, the year after that is going to be something else. And so some of the people had just learned that if I just sit here for a year, acknowledge and ignore you, then it'll just pass by me. What we found is you just have to continue to make sure that it doesn't fit the old norm that you might have. How about others?
So I really agree that talking about outcomes is the one of the best ways to go to start your Agile adoption. What techniques have people had success with? Like I've tried and experimented with actually building an outcome backlog to where people can kind of people can list and prioritize those. Is there anything else that anybody's had success with?
Could you give a little bit more detail on this on your backlog? I'm kind of curious.
Sure. It was actually a presentation at the Agile Alliance conference in Atlanta year before last, and it was the presenter was at the moment. But you basically crowdsource the outcomes that the teams would like to do, that the teams are looking for, and even managers, leaders, whoever your particular audience is, and then similarly to how you would do a product backlog, build an outcome backlog, so that there's a tangible list of prioritized things that we want to go tackle from an outcome basis.
An approach that I feel, and especially I'm keying in onto the classical organization, which I interpret to mean an organization that has been in the status quo for a very long time, to try to force or introduce a lot of change at the same time will either shock the system and break it, or it will essentially force people into their shells, causing a reaction to say, let's wait this one out. What an alternative could be is to pick one very simple, achievable business outcome to actually try to make a small amount of change and then let the system stabilize and approach change in a manner that gets progressive. In other words, like think Fibonacci's, you could say one change every quarter, then two change every quarter, then three changes every quarter, and try to increase the rate of change. Because what you want a classical organization to do is to get familiar with the rate of change, not just that we change for change's sake, right?
Right, and what we called those quick wins, and what we tend to do is, at least this was our old culture, is we'd pick the biggest, hardest problem and try to go solve it, and it would take a year, 2 years, 3 years to go fix this thing. That was the wrong thing to go pick. What you need to do is pick something that I can change today or this week. And by doing those quick wins and having a celebration at the end, people go, "Hey, this actually," they get that endorphin rush of we've moved a Post-it note. That one's done. Yay!
That's classic John Cotter.
Yeah, it is. It does come from. That's where I learned it from.
Cool.
One thing that I've at least tried is start from the emotions of the leaders. If you talk to people on the top and ask them, what really bugs you? What's your pain point every day or every week? Very often there's something emotional, like I have to do too much of this, that, and especially in classic organizations, very often it comes down, I have to control everything. So if you offer them an option to let go of something and still be pretty sure by, for example, sprint reviews or whatever method you propose, to get something off their hands making it into a concrete business benefit, and then get them emotionally engaged in feeling the benefit, because you can ask them then, now do you feel better? This is very strong to get their support.
Mm. Yeah,
but you need to make it reasonable in between. You can't just directly work on the emotion. That won't work.
Now, Nina, on the question box brought up the thing, well, organizations where management wants agile, but the Scrum Master has the face of an old timer. And by the way, being in my 50s, Nina, I'm not sure if I like that, but I'm not that old. These people just want to go and control. And in the environment, teamwork is not there. It's more about control mechanisms. These types of Scrum Masters that I've seen them. This is a big anti-pattern in my book. What do other people think?
I simply agree to you, Ray.
Okay.
Some people aren't like this. They didn't get the mindset.
Well, I think getting the mindset does take a little bit of time. I am a recovering command and control freak myself, and I know that moving towards servant leadership and synergistic leadership styles, that was a journey for me, and I actually had to talk to my staff and say that, look, this is what I'm trying to do. I need your help, and try to create some empathy behind some undoing of what I've learned over time. Absolutely.
So, are you in the position that the mindset is required to be in the process, though? Because I've often find that I can start the mechanics of an agile framework sometimes months before the mindset actually takes hold. It's actually that, most organizations don't have the ability to isolate and train and instill the mindset, then go and apply it to their work.
I tend to couple the two of them now. So when we, in our early days that we, started our agile adoptions, we would spend, we would go, here's the manifesto, and then quickly move. Here's the principles. You can read them offline, and let's go on to let's learn Scrum. And what we found is there was a nasty anti-pattern like this Scrum Master that was just mentioned by Nina, which was we couldn't at all get past the command and control structures versus, as a manager, what mindset should I have? And we weren't teaching the mindset alongside of it. So when we were reflecting how well it worked, we could never bring it back around to, are we actually shifting the culture? Or are we just making an ultimate, Scrum without the values is just a great command and control micromanagement system?
I think that's why it's so important that, this is a classical shuhari kind of thing. In the beginning, you are just on a shoe level. You don't know what agility really means and how it feels. And then you start using certain practices. In the beginning, you just use the practice. You don't really understand why this practice works and in which way to make this really agile. So what's very important at that moment is that you have an agile master around you who can help you with the mindset part. So both need to go hand in hand. The mechanical part for example, in using Scrum, but you also need an agile coach around you that helps you with the mindset change.
I do think maybe one final point, though, is since we're talking about in a classical organization, I've had some interesting looks across the conference table when I try to explain shuhari in a very classic traditional organization. They're like, why would you even try that?
There's this concept that an agile coach taught me a number of years ago, and that is when I come in from the perspective of my life is great and my team is great, and I teach from that perspective, and I'm talking to an individual who basically is sitting there and saying my life sucks and my team sucks, it's hard for them to hear what it is I'm trying to tell them. And so your method, when you say I first teach them a couple of iterations and then reflect on it and say, by the way, what we learned there was this, that sometimes is an approach that needs to be taken. The other thing is I've noticed that there have been people who've been scrummed, and I've heard this term that people say that someone attacked them and hit them over the head with Agile and Scrum, and these are, you have to rehabilitate these people. And I never thought I would. I'm an engineer, but I'm now also a counselor as well, and I have to counsel people back from abuse. And depending on how deep the problems are in the organization, and that's why I think the HR perspective in here is absolutely a must, because some of us who are equipped coming from that technical side don't have the formal training of how do I rehabilitate people. Emily, do you have something to add?
Oh yeah, I was very interested in the discussion around the command and control Scrum Masters, and how Scrum can quickly degrade into kind of a micromanagement framework. And right now I'm working with a very, very traditional organization. It's actually a religious fraternal order who are trying to adopt some agile practices and improve their internal customer relationships between their IT and insurance sales areas. And one of the approaches I'm taking to try to nip that command and control Scrum Master tendency in the bud is to roll into the training. And I'm doing classroom training for the entire organization, kind of stretched out over time, and talk a lot about the culture of Agile and how it is necessary to have that culture of accountability and autonomy at the team level to make Scrum work, and how Scrum isn't necessarily Agile in and of itself, and that you can be not Agile and still do Scrum. And I try to drive that home in the classroom training. And I don't know if there is anyone who's doing that type of work, and if they have any kind of insights on making that a reality.
Does anyone have anything to add on that? I know I do, but I've been talking a lot.
I was just going to offer some insight, because I think what you're asking, maybe I can clarify this. Are you looking for how that transition can be made from command and control PM to Scrum Master servant leader?
Well, what I'm hoping to do is, because I am the lone Agilist in the organization right now, I'm working alone as an enterprise Agile coach, and I'm hoping that there's some tips and tricks on keeping that grassroots. So as I train folks and release them into the organization to kind of spread it virally as change agents, how to, and I can't be with every team that's going to try Scrum every day, because there is only one of me. Is there any language or resources that I can point people to that might help keep that grassroots effort alive, and try to prevent the backsliding of new Scrum Masters into command and control?
Well, I made that jump myself, and I caught myself doing it. And with the help of a really great resource, which is Lisa Atkins' book and live lessons, video series, Coaching Agile Teams.
Oh, great book.
She's got some fantastic insight into that. And I caught myself in DSUs being the point where everybody was giving me updates and status updates. And I finally recognized, no, that's not my role. And it was directly from reading her book.
Yeah, it's a great book.
I may offer something that is contrary to what you described as your approach right now. So please take it as a gift, and maybe you can use it. I kind of feel like in an organization, a larger organization, when we are working or training with a few people, and then asking them to go out into other teams and be on their own to try to spread the message. It reminds me of Jerry Weinberg's law of raspberry jam. What he talks about is, if we spread the jam too thin on too many loaves of bread, then none of the breads actually get any good concentration of raspberry jam to make it feel like a good jelly sandwich. So perhaps an approach is to look at a few teams that you could join and make them excellent. That would take time, but it would create a high dose, a strong concentration of Agile folks in a very large organization who would become your advocates or future coaches as you start to go beyond a few teams. While if that is not possible, an alternative approach is to have some kind of a community that gets formed around your past training participants, where you can work with them to identify key problem areas or maybe bring in new practices so they feel more connected to the larger purpose.
George, thank you so much for that. That really validates one of the things that I've been doing. I started a Scrum Masters Guild for folks that are working with teams that are trying to be agile. So I bring the Scrum Masters together every 2 weeks to discuss their challenges and successes and try to, share learning in that community. So that really was a great validation. Thank you very much for that.
So one other thing to add to this as well is I found that we had certain individuals that were just uncomfortable with group sessions, and that the vulnerability of saying that I'm not good at something, because we were very much a culture of achievers. And for an achiever to say that, I don't know that, was a dangerous thing in the environment. And so we actually had to create a mentoring program where we would combine people who are someone who is a little bit more advanced in the journey working with another individual, where they can be vulnerable and be able to say, this is what I'm good at and this is what I'm not good at and what help can I provide.
I love that idea.
And it worked really well. And one of the things that we did, at least for our senior people in our organization, back to the review process, cloning yourself, that was a way that they could go off and help to clone themselves within the organization.
Yeah, and thanks for mentioning that. I started a Scrum Master Guild, and I'm currently at a point where it's not actually going very well because people are not really able to be very vulnerable and share that I'm actually struggling. Everybody's coming in and saying, "Hey, you're actually doing very well." Thanks for sharing that, and we're really looking at, okay, how can we actually enable where people can be vulnerable and say it's okay to say that I'm struggling with this.
One way to remove at least a bit the vulnerability is if you talk about learnings. What did you learn? What are you trying to learn? What are you trying to master? Because it's totally different to say, I'm currently looking at that problem and trying to crack that nut instead of I don't know how to do it. It's the different angle that you can take, and then you can talk about options instead of deficits.
Sure. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it's the keyword yet. I haven't gotten there yet, but I'm working on it.
Yeah, and just adding to the mentoring, because I was in the lucky position to really benefit from a experienced mentoring and that part. Just the fact that somebody takes time for you personally is so valuable to allow yourself to reflect. So whenever you have the chance to benefit from something like that, by all means, do it.
So one lightweight way of introducing mentoring is like that biweekly structure, and just run a lean coffee for your Scrum Masters.
Absolutely. I've done that before as well. And that's especially with things that you want to take offline that doesn't apply to the entire group. It might just apply to one, and the person feels uncomfortable having that subject in there.
Yeah, we found that lean coffees have been a really big hit internally, especially when we started a new cohort into the training, because it's an 8-week program. Because I'm not a boot camp type person. I like to stretch the learning out, give people time to reflect and absorb on what we covered in the training. And we run lean coffees both for the folks who are new to Scrum, and I found we've had a lot of success with people feeling, I think, validated when they see their question that they thought was stupid or amateurish get upvoted to the top of the list. But we also have a lean coffee where we focus on folks who have come from an Agile background that are in the organization already and focusing how to transform. So I've been trying to crowdsource the transformation and bring folks in who are already entrenched in the organization but know how Agile works and why it could work there, and give them that voice in a lean coffee format. It's been also very successful.
I honestly think that can occur in the same type of structure we've got now, where we've got tools that, like we're doing on this webinar, where we can get people from across organizations into a format like that. So even if you can't get a cohort together within your organization, I think through an organization like Agile Alliance, we could possibly be creating things like this across organizations for people to help each other up that path.
Absolutely, and one of the things that I've noticed, having run these types of calls for years now, is that there's always this one individual from a far off team that felt that they had no support mechanism within their organization, and the call became gold for them because they actually now had a group of people that they can learn with, and that's a huge plus with that. We are approaching the top of the hour. My goodness, this hour went by really quick. For people to let you guys know, I will be at the Deliver Agile event, which will be over in Austin. Hopefully, if you're there, please look me up. I will be floating around someplace, probably either at the Agile Alliance booth or one of the other sessions, but I will be there. Please send me an email and let's link up and have a conversation there. With that, with the Deliver Agile and my travel plans, because the Agile Alliance staff is also happening that weekend, I'm going to have to move the next time slot for the coaching network. I'm going to be moving it a week earlier. So you'll see a notice come out for that. I apologize for the little bit of the thrash there, but as events come up like this, we want to make sure that we still have the call once a month because we seem to be enjoying it. So everyone, thank you. I appreciate this week.
Thank you, Ray.
Thanks, Ray.
Thank you, Ray.
This podcast is provided by the Agile Alliance for educational and informative purposes only. To find out more information about the member-supported Agile Alliance, please go to agilealliance.org to find out about more upcoming events as well as different programs that are available to help you with your Agile journey.